I'm going to start with a new topic, contemporary global concern, nuclear proliferation. So, nuclear proliferation is about the spread of nuclear weapons, which is a matter of security to the world. But this debate around nuclear proliferation is not about the use of this technology. The debate is about the peaceful versus military use of this technology. So, this dual use technology, it can be explained here is where, in the way that nuclear technology, it result in generation of immense amount of heat, tremendous amount of heat. So this heat and energy, if it used for civilian and constructive purposes, then it can provide energy security to the world. It can electrify the darkened places in the world and can provide uninterrupted supply of electricity for many generations. But if the same technology used for destructive purposes and help in building bombs, then it will be a security nightmare for the world. But in this anarchical international sphere, we do not know if the countries they are seeking this material in the name of civilian purposes, if they are genuine, if they are valid, and the same material, even if it is sought for civilian purposes, it can be diverted to make bombs. So this is another security issue concerned with the transfer of or acquisition of nuclear technology. And it is mentioned here that it is difficult to differentiate from the end use for which the technology is pursued. The intentions in the international arena, they cannot be justified and they cannot be gauged into, they cannot be looked into, because the anarchical arena, it is full of lies and deceit. Now, when it comes to regulate the supply of nuclear technology, the policies around nuclear proliferation, they present interplay of two sets of issues. One is the technical and political set of issue, and the other relate to capability and intent of the countries concerned. So the technical element in non-proliferation, it seeks to deny the critical assets to country that seeks it, or if it cannot deny them, then it can make these assets available under a safeguard system. So the meaning of the technical element is that first, if you know, if you are sure, if you are certain that a particular country is a rogue element, and if it acquires the nuclear technology, it will be a security threat to the world, such as if the same terrorist element, ISIS, if it seeks nuclear material, and even if it says that it wants to use those nuclear assets for civilian purposes, for generation of electricity, those words cannot be taken at face value. Then it becomes the duty of the world that such demands are rightfully rejected and they should be denied. All the rogue elements, all the terrorist group, all such warmongering organization, all such warmongering states, they should be denied this critical asset. But then there are some genuine countries, some developed, some democracies, some very stable country, politically stable countries. So let's say if Luxembourg or Sweden, Switzerland, Brazil, if some of these countries that have been in the existence, and many of these are middle power that have worked on a politically stable course, and if they seeks to acquire these assets, then these countries they can be provided such a system, such assets, but under a safeguard system, that there would be a regulator who would be looking, who would keep a watch on them, who would inspect and monitor their assets, their technology, their end use, and such and such. This safeguard system, this watchdog system, it places restraint on the possible use of nuclear technology for weapon production and ensure that technology that is transferred or acquired remains for peaceful use. So, International Atomic Energy Association is such a watchdog and such a safeguard system that put restraint in terms of regulation and monitoring so that any asset that is acquired for civilian use will will be deployed, will be used for such said purposes. Then comes this second political component of the system. It operates at two levels. First, it seeks to create an international pressure on the country to desist from going nuclear. And second, provides various incentives and disincentives to countries in form of economic and other way to dissuade them from going nuclear. So I don't think this need further explanation. This is a carrot and stick policy by which at the political level, international, bilateral and multilateral level, all the country that are that are seeking a nuclear status, they should be desisted from that status unless if their demands are genuine. Let's take the case of Taiwan and South Korea. So both of countries, if they demand their strategic autonomy, strategic nuclear security, then their demands are justified and genuine because their partner, their rival, China in case of Taiwan and North Korea in case of South Korea, both the rivals, they are rogue elements and both of them, they are nuclear states. So in such a case, such genuine demand, they cannot be thwarted. But other than that, if Sudan or Iran or any other country which does not need any such security, if their demands are not justified, any rogue element, any terrorist organization, any terrorist group, any revolutionary group, so all of them, they should be desisted from going nuclear. And if the international pressure does not work, then second, they can be provided carrot and stick in terms of incentive and disincentives, and both of them, they can work at a large scale that help in countries to desist from seeking this status. So this will be political rationale for not going nuclear. Then the third paragraph, the capability of a state to go nuclear is dependent on the technical component. And technical component because the development of a nuclear technology and infrastructure that is capable of producing a nuclear weapon is the technical dimension of the problem of proliferation. A nuclear capable state may be technically ripe for nuclear proliferation, but it would be political intention of exercising the choice to go in for a nuclear weapon. Now, the meaning of this complex passage is that nuclear technology, it will be acquired and it will be transferred because, as I've said, and as this text says, that nuclear technology has a civilian dimension, a peaceful dimension, and any country can acquire it. But to go nuclear, to become a nuclear state, or to be able to produce a nuclear weapon, all of them, they need a critical infrastructure. So this infrastructure, this is a technical element. And even if a country that has acquired nuclear assets for civilian purposes, and if it has the required critical infrastructure to produce a bomb, it is the political intention, it is the political feasibility that determines whether the concerned country will go nuclear. Because after all, it is about staying in the world. And if various incentives and disincentives, if they do not work, if they do not provide such a hedge, such a leverage, then it means either this country, this concerned country, either this has gone rogue, or if it is second, if it is existing on another planet, because we need to coexist together. If everybody goes in hunting for nuclear weapons, then nobody will be there to see the consequences, because the nuclear weapons of present time, they are so devastating that they you do not need to use them. Right now we have 12,000 nuclear weapons, and all of them, if they are deployed once, then it means they will destroy everything, every single species, every single individual of any kind of species in this world, in the on this earth. So that is the amount of devastation that will be caused if all those nuclear weapons are detonated. So in that case, any country that wants to go nuclear, it will it would have to take a political decision, and that political decision, it have many factors, whether it is ready to go nuclear, whether it is ready to face all the economic and trade embargo, whether it is ready to antagonize all its friend and foe. Then if the requirement of nuclear weapon, if it can trade off with all the other sector that need the fund, because development of nuclear weapon, it will take uh, it take lot of fund, it will consume lot of public exchequer. And in such a situation, if you are seeking to build a bomb, then all of other infrastructure fund, all of infrastructure expenses, they needed to be traded off. They needed to be diverted for building bombs. Now let's have a look at the incentive to produce a nuclear weapons, which are: it will increase international status, which is a psychological aspect of perceiving to cross the threshold and become a great power. Then the domestic political requirements or political pressures. So domestic political requirements, such as in case of South Korea, in case of India, in case of Taiwan, and in case of many countries which are surrounded by nuclear weapon states. Then this possession of nuclear weapon, it will increase strategic autonomy. And next, a strategic hedge against military and political uncertainty, which is about the reliability of allies, because international sphere, there are no friends and foes, only interest. So the international sphere, it is full of mistrust. And in such a case, presence of possession of nuclear weapon, it acts as a hedge, so that no other country, even if your country is reeling under any civil war, if your country is politically unstable, so no other country can take its advantage. Then nuclear weapon acts as a weapon of last resort. And the last one, bargain or leverage over the developed nation, because if you do not show your teeth, you cannot exist in a jungle, you cannot exist in the wilderness. And such teeth, nuclear weapons are such a teeth. Then the disincentives that may discourage nations from going nuclear, which include resource diversion to nuclear program. As I have said, that nuclear program, they need lot of fund. And if a country, if it seeks to build a nuclear weapon, then all other infrastructure, welfare projects, social priorities, they needed to be traded off. Then the adverse national and international public opinion, because the when you go nuclear and others are desisted from it, then it creates uh, an adverse opinion. And the international sphere, even if it is anarchical, the trade and economic issue, they are at the heart of everything, because whether you need to go nuclear or not, they are political element, they are security element. And it is not that every day and night you are surrounded by such intimidation or surrounded by the nuclear threats. It is the trade which rules the world. Everyday people, the common people, which go by their everyday, which have their own dreams, which they have their own lives, they don't worry about whether they possess a nuclear weapon. All they care about is whether their occupations, whether their sweat, if whether their blood for which they have worked so far, if it is generating some income, and that income will be your will be the important element of their life, and that important element collectively known as trade. So trade is at the heart of everything, the meaning of which is, and when you stop looking at this angle and instead focus on security element, then this thing will create an negative opinion about a country. So this is another such disincentives. Then next one, disruption of established and conventional security guarantees provided by some of the great powers. The meaning of which is that by carrot and stick policy, if a country does not go nuclear, then some security guarantee would be provided by the Western power, the great powers. But when you go nuclear, when you possess nuclear weapons, then that security guarantee, especially in terms of the conventional weapons, this will be taken out. The next one is infeasibility of developing the required technology and consequently the corresponding nuclear strategy. Then the another element or another disincentive is the nuclear technology. Even if you develop it, it is infeasible. Infeasible in the sense that first, many prominent nation, um, uh, many established country, they they will not buy this technology because the international atmosphere is built around that way. So first thing, this, even if you acquire this technology, even if you develop this technology, you will have no buyers. Then second, even if this you do not need to, you do not want to sell this technology, the other country, they will see you with scorn and mistrust. That is another element that makes the whole technology, the whole situation infeasible, because in developing a required technology, you made more foe than friends, and the perceived status that you sought for yourself, it is not there. You sought a status of a great power, you sought a status of an established power, and in place of it, you got nothing but mistrust and scorn, mistrust and skepticism. So in any way, this infeasibility, it has many dimensions. I mentioned the two, the buy and mistrust, and even the diversion of fund, it is not feasible. After spending millions and billions of dollars on building a bomb, you finally got to the point that even if you had made the bond, you have also dragged your countries 100 years deep in poverty and pauperization. Then the final disincentives is the fear of an adverse international reaction, which would have an impact on trade and other relations. Because we, the Homo sapiens, we are living on this earth, and even if the trust is not there, still we have a semblance of a relationship, a working relationship, a functional relationship, and trade is also important. And what would happen if you acquire a nuclear weapon, but all of the countries, they have laden you with tariffs and embargoes? You are not able to sell your produce. The domestic economy, first, it got crippled by the development of particular nuclear bomb. Millions and billions of dollars have been invested in it. So it got a bad leg to your domestic economy. It crippled it. But and after that, when the international public, it came to know about it, they stop all kinds of trade with you. So it was like adding fuel to the fire. You have nothing left. So, these are the characteristics that desist many countries from going nuclear, because in the end, the security element, it does not outweigh all the other benefit that are associated with not going nuclear. The next paragraph, nuclear weapon program, they usually require a long lead time for countries that have no nuclear infrastructure. So any nation seeking to manufacture a nuclear weapon must develop an appropriate source of fissile material, which is a major technical barrier. So the core of a nuclear bomb, it is made by highly enriched uranium or plutonium. 15 to 25 kilogram of highly enriched uranium or 5 to 8 kilogram of plutonium are generally considered necessary for necessary minimum for a core of a multi-kiloton atomic bomb. So these are the basic technical requirement, and as it is mentioned here, that generally the nuclear weapon program, they require a long lead time, and even if you have the required infrastructure, that is a nuclear facility, you need fissile material, which is not available in plenty. And then the other barrier is about the quantity, that if you want to make a multi-kiloton atomic bomb, then you need this much quantity. The next paragraph, a nation seeking to manufacture a nuclear bomb must have a source of this fissile material. So there are three main approaches that nations take to overcome this barrier. First is by developing nuclear facilities dedicated to purpose of weapon development. The second is the development of a civilian nuclear program that is free of safeguard and the subsequent acquisition of sensitive technology for the development of a nuclear bomb. And the third is theft of a raw material or the weapon itself. So these are the three ways by which countries they acquire the fissile material. The first one, they develop nuclear facilities for weapon development program. Then, by lying about the intention, they start a civilian nuclear program and then acquire this sensitive nuclear technology. And third, which is they can steal the raw material or the weapon itself. So these are the ways. Then let's talk about evolution of non-proliferation policy. So nuclear non-proliferation policy has emerged through four main stages. The first, the post-war phase, that was characterized by secrecy and effort to retain monopolistic control on the parts of United States as the sole nuclear power in the world. Because after the Second World War ended, when the USA, the US, it has deployed the two bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In that situation, no country could challenge it. So, for a brief time, it remained the sole hegemon, the sole acquirer, the sole monopoly in terms of nuclear weapon. Then the second phase, in which a liberal policy ushered in by President Eisenhower through Atoms for Peace program, which were announced in the United Nations in 1953. And the third phase, the policy of control through safeguard, that came to sponsored by nuclear weapon power to contain the spread of nuclear weapons. And this policy of control, it got manifested in many such treaties, such as Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968, and then many others such as CTBT, Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty of 1996. And the final phase, the reactive phase on the part of nuclear weapon power, it occurred in the post Indian nuclear test of 1974 and subsequent testing by India and Pakistan in 1998. So this phase saw the creation of Nuclear Supply Club and many other legislation such as Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act of 1978 of the United States. Now let's have a look at US monopoly. So the main aim of the Anglo-Saxon partner during the Second World War was to win the race to build a nuclear weapon before Nazi Germany could. And Soviet Union had been kept out of it. In that case, the United States, Canada, and Britain they signed the Quebec Agreement in 1943, under which they decided not to communicate any information to third party without mutual consent. Following the detonation of first atomic bomb in Hiroshima, they adopted a comprehensive non-proliferation policy towards the rest of the world, by which they acquired the bomb and they kept it to themselves. This this uh, this strategy, this technology, it was kept secret, and it was made in that way that it would not be shared with any of the world powers. There was an agreement not to disclose the practical application of atomic energy before effective enforceable safeguard could be put in place. So it was thought that this technology would be kept in secret. Then the first meeting of United Nations Atomic Energy Commission received two reports that sought to link the development of commercial nuclear policy and nuclear weapons. So this Baruch Plan 1946, the proposed establishment of an international atomic development authority to regulate and control all aspects of development and use of atomic energy. The meaning of this passage is that the first UN Atomic Energy Commission, after the World War was over, it sought to look at the angle of development of nuclear energy or the use of atomic energy, because its its consequences has been seen, its adverse consequences had been seen and had been monitored, and now the whole world knew that there could be such weapons, and everyone know who was the detonator, who was the monopoly, and it was an open secret that sooner or later everyone would start in a race, starting with the USSR or Russia. So the United Nations it sought to find a way out. It sought to keep a watchdog, keep a watch on this development of nuclear weapons by other countries. So this Baruch plan it proposed that a regulatory development authority would be established so that it can regulate and control all aspects of development and use of atomic energy, because it had one another element that was its civilian element, and this proposed IAEA it have the statutory power to control, license, and inspect all other nuclear facilities. Then the second such report was the Erickson Lilienthal report of 1946. That too played on the same line that says that current American monopoly over nuclear weapon would end sooner or later. That it would be necessary to install mechanism to control the spread of this technology. So the same fears were echoed by both the reports, and both of them they ask about same creation of a strong international authority to regulate the commercial development of nuclear energy. And the fears were same. First, that the same sooner or later the same technology would be acquired by different nations, and then another element was that it even if this technology it was used for killing, it was used as a for a military purpose, it has a practical or a civilian dimension as well. The same energy it can be used for generation of electricity, so the commercial application cannot be ruled out. In such a case, a strong international authority can act as a watchdog. Then the failure to get either of the proposal adopted led the United States to enact the Atomic Energy Act of 1946. So under this law, the American government obtained title to all nuclear facilities in which fissionable nuclear material which could be manufactured, and became the sole proprietor of all fissionable material. So the meaning of this passage is that when none of these reports were accepted, so United States, it the US needed to do something because it has seen the devastation caused by a nuclear bomb. So by the passage of this act, it acquired all sides of this fissionable material. So when the Canadians and British they came to know about this policy, they became suspicious. So after the passage of this act, the British they embarked on their own general purpose nuclear program that eventually came to focus on weapon program due to political and security consideration. And the Canadian who was silent till now, they also acquired this technological expertise and raw material, and they also embarked on a nuclear program. After a few After some time, Soviet Union it also entered the nuclear field with the first explosion in 1949. The British they exploded their first bomb in 1952. The French entered the club in 1960, and China it entered in 1964. So you can see from 1945 to 1964, all of the major powers they had acquired this technology one way or another, and they also tested their nuclear weapons without the aid of United States. So the interest in nuclear technology that nations around the world showed in 1960s came to be based on two considerations. First, national security, and second, commercial use of nuclear technology. So the efforts by nuclear states to promote institutional mechanism to limit the spread of nuclear weapons were perceived by non-nuclear state as self-serving attempts to protect the political and economic interest of the nuclear power. And you can see the same thing playing out here. First, the US it tried to acquire, tried to keep the nuclear policy, the nuclear facilities, the critical technology to itself. So this attempt was seen by the Canadians and the British with suspicion, and they embarked on their own nuclear program and did made their presence felt in this nuclear field. And gradually, one by one, the Soviets, the British, the Canadians, the French, the Chinese, all of them, they did develop their own nuclear weapons without the aid of US. And when they had developed their own, they they walked the same line. They also tried. They also talk about putting in institutional mechanism to limit the spread of nuclear weapons. So, which in another term, it means if you have acquired the nuclear weapons, do not let others acquire this technology. And this thing again in the same whirlpool, it was seen with suspicion. All the non-nuclear state they perceive this thing as an attempt by the nuclear power to desist all other nations, all other countries from acquiring this technology. And this thing it has some ramifications. It has some consequences which were seen later. India, Pakistan, Israel, Iran, and North Korea are such an examples. Now let's look at atoms of peace. So in 1953, President Eisenhower he enunciated the Atoms for Peace program before United Nations, and under this proposal, the United Nations, the United States, Soviet Union, and other countries they were to contribute fissile material to an International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA), and this agency would be responsible for storage and security of this material. This agency would then be responsible for providing electrical energy to the world at large. So, for that matter, the US Atomic Energy Act it was amended to allow for the implementation of this new liberal policy. And It took a little time for the political rhetoric to get translated into concrete policy. By 1955, the program got underway, and that year, Argonne Laboratory opened the School of Nuclear Science and Engineering, and this is not much relevant. Finally, the first United Nations Conference on Peaceful Use of Atomic Energy, it was held in Geneva, and the US has negotiated agreements with at least 27 nations for nuclear cooperation. So again, the fears that were echoed by the two reports, the Baruch report, the Lilienthal report, or both of them, they highlighted the same thing, that this technology, it is going to be acquired sooner or later, and since it has a civilian dimension, then the spread of this technology, it cannot be stopped for long. And again, the president, under his liberal policy Atoms for Peace, he diverted the same fissile material for generation of electricity. Now the safeguard. So the impetus for of this Atoms for Peace program, it did not last long. The agency came to establish in 1957. The agency's function is to seek to accelerate and enlarge the contribution of atomic energy to peace, health, and prosperity throughout the world, and not to be used for any military purpose. So this agency, IAEA, it put in some safeguard which was based on four elements. First, the review of design of nuclear facilities. Second, the specification of a system of records and account. Third one, specification of system of reports. And fourth one, inspection of safeguarded facility to verify compliance with the agreement. Now the meaning of this passage, it is that the same agency, it was established in 1957 for civilian use of this nuclear technology, which would be contributed by USA and many such powers, and this contribution of fissile material, it would be used for energy generation, and the regulator which would look after whether this energy, whether this fissile material, whether this technology is used for the said purpose, it was established, and its function are these, that it would review all such nuclear facilities. It would look if the facilities, if they are for civilian purpose or if they are developing weapons in disguise, all such. The logic of safeguard that formed the essential thrust of nuclear policy was the essential ingredients of problems of control over proliferation. The first level of control comes through detection of diversion of nuclear material for civilian facility to military use. So, meaning of this passage, that these safeguards were put in. So the logic behind it was that even if some words are spoken, some policies are made, but it is the actual implementation that creates problem, and it is by actual implementation that we come face to face with the real world problem. And the first problem in this international sphere, it is about this deceit and mistrust. So even if a country says that it is seeking the same fissile material for energy generation for civilian use, the same material can be diverted. Nobody's spoken words can be taken at face value, especially in international sphere when everybody is concerned about their own security. So this formed the logic. So first level of control, they were about detecting such diversion, the diversion that take this nuclear material from civilian to military use. Now the second level of control was response to detection of diversion to nuclear material. So if such diversions are detected, if the material was sought for civilian purpose but instead used for developing a weapon, then what should be done? So many sanctions and many political measures were there and were put in place so that such diversion can be handled. So the third level was laying down restriction on supply of nuclear related material. So this third level of safeguard was that that this supply of fissile material, the supply of critical nuclear technology or nuclear assets, they should not be freely available. They need to be restrictions on the supply, restriction on not only the supply of material, even restriction in acquiescing to such demands. First, the demand should be thoroughly checked, and only after when necessary safeguards have been placed, necessary screening has been done, only after you can proceed with the um, further decisions. So the evolution of international safeguard, they went through two distinct phases. The first was the pre-NPT phase, wherein the focus has been on individual countries, and the second phase ushered in by NPT that made safeguards a universal norm. So the meaning of this passage is nothing that there's these international safeguards, they before NPT came into force, that is by 1967 or 1968. So they the safeguard policy, it reigned from first phase, from the use of atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to enactment of NPT in 1968. In this phase, when such a treaty, such a collective treaty was not there, then individual country and its application, it was screened out and it was thoroughly looked. And individual, all such demands, they have been looked as a case by case basis. But when NPT came into force, such demands or such cases, such safeguard, they become universal. Now they did not need a country by country, did not need to look at the safeguard issue from individual case by case basis. Now let's have a look at nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So the entry of China in 1964 into the nuclear club, it transformed the debate on the nuclear issue from the East-West Cold War issue that was to be considered mainly by developed into a global concern. The meaning of this passage was that earlier, nuclear club, which means which country can acquire nuclear weapons. So before China became a nuclear power, it was believed that third world countries, especially the countries of eastern and southern sphere, they do not have the required infrastructure, nor do they have the economic whereabout to pursue such a nuclear status, which in short means the people of third world, they cannot acquire the nuclear weapons anyway, in any way, anyhow. But when China became a nuclear power, now the issue, the Western sleep, it the Western hegemony, it got dismantled. Now this became a global issue that if a country like China, because the country of the status of China in 1964 was not what we see today. Today's China is a contender for global power, global status. But in 1964, it was an underdeveloped country. So if an underdeveloped country can enter the nuclear club, then it is bound to dispel the sleep of many major powers. So this is how this became a global issue. The earlier focus had mostly been on weapon system, strategic parity, and corresponding geostrategic consideration. Now the focus shifted to problem of diversion of material from peaceful to weapon use. So this shift of focus, it happened. It was a consequence of China's nuclear test. So while this concern was expressed in the context of discussion on the NPT, it was Only after the 1974 Indian test that such a direct linkage came to be acknowledged as reality. So the whole concern about diversion of material from peaceful to weapon use, or the whole concern about safeguarding the spread of nuclear weapons, it became a reality after the 1974 Indian test, the Indian nuclear test in 1974, and that uh, broke the glass ceiling about East versus West dilemma. So this concern for control over proliferation and possible safeguard, it led to creation of NPT, and the chief motivations of its sponsor, the USA, Great Britain, USSR, the motivation was to prevent further proliferation of the nuclear weapons. So this treaty it divided the signatory into two categories. First, those who possess the nuclear bomb before the cutoff date, 1st January 1967, and those who did not. So it commits the non-weapon state to inspection of the holdings of nuclear material. So the NPT commits them to negotiate safeguard agreement with this agency. These safeguards are not binding upon the weapon state. So in exchange of the commitment by the non-weapon state to refrain from producing or acquiring nuclear weapons, the weapon state agreed to following. Now, before having a look at the conditions, first let's have um, a look at the meaning of this passage. So NPT it had a cutoff date which is 1st January 1967. So it divided the world into two blocks. First, those countries that have possessed nuclear weapons before this date. So they were known as nuclear states. Now, those countries which did not possess the nuclear weapon before this date, they were known as non-nuclear states. And all those countries, non-nuclear states that did not possess nuclear weapons before this date, they needed to be inspected whether they hold the nuclear material, whether they have such nuclear facility, whether they have such intention, and even if these safeguards were not binding, but if non-nuclear states, if non-weapon state, they if they accept the condition. So in exchange for this condition, the weapon state, the nuclear state, they agreed for the following things. First, not to transfer nuclear weapons or other weapon, and not to desist non-weapon state to acquire such a weapon or device. The meaning of this line is that nuclear states, those who possess nuclear weapons before this cutoff date, they will not transfer nuclear weapon to any other country, and second, they will not assist any non-nuclear states in acquiring such weapons. So this means if one nuclear weapon state A does not have the nuclear weapons before this cutoff date, so by that matter, by such condition, it will be known as a non-nuclear state, non-weapon state. Now, this non-weapon state, when it has inspected of these facilities and it has been found that it does not hold any such nuclear material, it does not possess such nuclear material or nuclear facilities. Now, it is obvious that this non-nuclear state will have two security concerns. First, from nuclear state, and other from non-nuclear state. So the first from nuclear state we will talk about it later, but the other concern with those states which do not have nuclear weapons now, but they they may develop such nuclear weapon in the future, or such major power, they may assist such a non-state in acquiring such weapons. In that case, such doubts, such curiosity, such concern, they were addressed by this particular treaty. That in exchange for not going nuclear, non-weapon state, they they were assured that other non-weapon state they will not be given any nuclear material or nuclear weapon. Then the second assurance, to seek discontinuance of all underground nuclear tests as a corollary to 1953 partial test ban treaty. So, which means that all other underground nuclear facilities that were or nuclear tests that were discounted by 1953 PTBT partial test ban treaty, which allowed such underground tests, all such underground tests will also be discontinued. Third, to refrain from the threat or the use of force in compliance of the UN Charter, which means the ultimate threat. When I said a country A is a non-nuclear state, now it has threat from two states. First, that is nuclear, and second, which is non-nuclear. So non-nuclear concern were addressed. Now, what if a nuclear state attacks on a non-nuclear state using its nuclear weapons? So this concern was addressed that all such threats, all such use of force will be restrained. Then to develop research, production and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes and help the developing country in this regard. And the next incentive was that nuclear facility for peaceful generation of nuclear energy would be constructed, would be developed, and this would help a particular country in achieving energy security. Now, the fifth element, to make available to all states the potential benefit from peaceful use of nuclear explosions. And the sixth, pursue negotiation to end the nuclear arms race and move towards nuclear disarmament. So both the element last fifth and sixth, they are easy to understand. Next paragraph. The NPT became the first step to the construction of an effective international regime designed to halt the proliferation. And there has been a consensus on the part of Americans and Soviets that unfettered proliferation of nuclear weapons would destabilize the international order. So both the Americans and the Soviets, they understood, because by that time both of them they had acquired around 5,000 to 6,000 nuclear weapons, and they understood that if this race keeps on hedging, if the race keeps on expanding, the this will yield nothing. The race would end at an annihilation. Annihilation means complete destruction, because even if you keep acquiring weapons of mass destruction, if you progress from kiloton to megaton and megaton to gigaton, the extra edge, this will not yield anything. First, nobody is going to use such a weapon when you have 5,000 nuclear weapons. Now you know that you cannot use them, because if you use them, they would not be anybody living to see the consequences. This would end not only the Homo sapiens race but all other species. Everything would be annihilated, everything would be wiped out. So this unfettered, this unstoppable race, it needed to be stopped. But this view, the halting of nuclear proliferation, this view had not been shared by France, China, India, Israel, and many countries. Even in the present contemporary world, many countries do not echo such views. Everybody want to be assured of their own security, and for which nuclear weapon it act as a powerful deterrent. Anyway, both the countries they did not sign the NPT. So the next paragraph, the non-nuclear weapon states were also critical of this treaty. They perceived this to be a discriminatory treaty. The main points of criticism of this treaty were the asymmetric nature of treaty provisions that impose safeguard only on non-weapon state. The first criticism, that the safeguard were there only for non-weapon state. Then the preservation of commercial interests of weapon state by providing them the right to explore peaceful use program. And second, the second criticism was that this commercial use or the civilian use of uh, weapon, civilian use of nuclear technology, it was also monopolized by the weapon state, the nuclear state. The non-weapon state, non-nuclear state, they were not trusted that they would use the same nuclear technology for civilian purposes. And the third criticism, the vagueness of this commitment on the part of weapon state. So all the commitments, all the concerns they address, all the conditions and all the assurances they made, all of them were vague. And in the whole atmosphere, it was fraught with mistrust. In such a situation, their the core concern was not addressed. That even if assurances were made, those assurances, if if they can be made binding, then some of their concerns, some of their the itches, it can find a functional loophole. Functional loophole means that if assurances are given, then the countries, they can find some leeway, they can find some breather upon which they can place their trust. Now, the fourth concern was about the failure to address legitimate security concern of the non-weapon state, which is similar to the third one. But the fourth criticism, it is clear about what it is talking about, that they have some security concern. And what if even after the assurances are given, if the weapon state, they go on a hunting expedition and kill all the non-weapon state, such security concern, they cannot be thwarted in the name of international relations, or in the name of United Nations safeguards. Then, unlike the earlier era, the NPT system of safeguard, they came to be perceived as an infringement on the political sovereignty of the state, because this NPT system, it gave the weapon state the right to inspect the critical technological facilities in non-weapon state. So this was an infringement, or in other words, this is a violation of the political sovereignty of a state. This situation, it can be compared with invasion of privacy. The NPT, it had provided for periodic review conferences, and in 1995 the conference decided to extend the treaty indefinitely. So this is it for this lecture. We will proceed from the supply group in the next lecture. Thank you very much.